Dear friends, colleagues, welcome back, and welcome to the people that have just joined us. We already had a morning session in which we tried to showcase what the General Research Fellows have done. And we will now continue with two panels about current challenges in working with digital data, digitalization, new services. And we do that because today's event marks the end of the ECePS Era Chair project. And during this project, we studied, developed, reflected upon digital services and uses of existing data sets. And first of all, I would really like to mention that there is reason to be proud of what we accomplished. But there always is a but, right? I think it's also fair to say that ECePS has been a research project characterized by learning, development endeavors, meaning that we also faced new challenges, engaged in all kinds of learning activities, partly also discovered that some challenges were harder than expected. And one of the wicked problems that we identified and that we did not ultimately solve, I would say, is how to deal with publicly available data sets, how to make better use of publicly available data sets in research, but also in society more broadly. And this is a bit of a, well, curious observation, because open data have been there for decades. We've been discussing open data and uses of existing data sets for decades. At the same time, there is an unruly practice that we also encountered during the ECePS Era Chair project. So in the afternoon session, again, we would like to explore this unruly practice just a bit more and reflect on lessons learned, identify issues that need to be resolved in two relevant areas, and that is the uses of data sets in research and also the uses of data sets in developing new services more generally. So in a minute or so, we will start with exploring the potential and challenges of open data in research. And we are honored, I think, to welcome a panel of distinguished experts. And I will very briefly introduce the members of the panel. So next to me is Dr. Ott Velsberg, a research fellow at the Faculty of Informatics at the University of Omiya, and Chief Data Officer of Estonia. And in the latter role, Dr. Velsberg is responsible for driving the country's data policy and for initiatives related to use of data and AI in the public sector. Next to Ott, Professor Evelyn Urma, Professor in Geoinformatics in the Department of Geography of the University of Tartu. Professor Urma is a leading expert in geospatial data management and geovisualization. And among many other things, she is currently leading the Center of Excellence for Sustainable Land Use. Next in line is Dr. Kuli Taro, Head of Knowledge Transfer and Director of the Public Administration and Innovation Master's Program at the Ragnar Nurkse Department of Innovation and Governance at Tallinn University of Technology. And among many other responsibilities, she is a member of the Open Government Development Committee. Last but not least, our own Dr. Michael Solvak. Dr. Solvak is Vice Dean for Research and Development at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Tartu, and he has ample experience in managing CITES, our research group that develops data-driven public services using registry and log data. I would like this session, this first session, but arguably also the second session to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, suggestions, solutions, whatever, please raise your hand and let's try to make this, again, this conversation as interactive as possible. So let's start the discussion and let's try to have a better understanding of the challenges of open data in research. My opening question would be, my invitation for you would be to ask you to reflect a bit on how you use open data in your research, and what did you manage to do with this open data? Perhaps, Michael, the floor is for you for a very brief first reflection.
Okay, very briefly then. So I hope that others have time as well. Jokes aside. Yeah. I mean, I would say I have sort of a bit like a troubling relationship with open data. I mean, I have used it in multiple projects, but I would say always have ended up with basically seeing that this particular data set is sort of lacking in some dimensions. First of all, obviously it's secondary data. Most of our research questions usually do need purposely collected data, and secondary data obviously isn't that. The positive sides of it, government open data, if it's from certain registries or from other data sources, is that it has a very wide coverage of the, let's say, the whole population or any entity that is sort of relevant, their businesses or whatnot. But at the same time, it tends to be rather limited. So it's a lot of information on a lot of subjects, but very shallow, limited information. And we do certain types of research projects, then it tends to be a very limiting factor there. So I would say my experience is that we have been able to do something which I sort of can call like glorified sociology on it, show certain types of patterns, but to take it a bit further, try to explore, for example, causal questions. Usually it is not really usable. So we ended up using it as some sort of additional elements that we can add to data that we have purposefully collected, and some elements of it can then come also from open data simply to enrich or allow us to monitor something or answer certain questions because this additional piece of data is coming as well. So I would say the usefulness of it definitely is below the promise of open data, which we sort of have been sold over the years. I haven't really sort of bought into that story too much. Very general, but we can take it, make it more concretely.
Kulidao, what are your experiences with open data?
Although I work at the university today, I have used actually more data as a public servant for analytical work and for supervision. So I'm very much familiar with all those data quality problems in even basic state registries, and about the methodology problems, how the data is actually collected, and how the government is actually changing the data, the methodology of collecting the data. So some data is not actually comparable anymore. But just to give a simple example, I'm also a member of the Council of the Estonian Cooperation Assembly. It's a foundational think tank founded by the President of Estonia. And we manage the Citizens Initiative portal. And we use open data to track the progress of the citizens' initiatives. So what actually happens to the proposals. And so we use automated open data from the parliament, from the procedures of the parliament. And we also use the document registries of government agencies. And we do it every day. It's kind of like a routine. But also, I'm involved in the process of publishing Estonian Human Development Report. And next report will be published next year, and its focus is on education. And maybe some of you have read an article recently published by our editor-in-chief, and it was called about the PISA blindness. Well, basically what we discovered was that, well, the next report will be based on data from government registries. And we discovered that although we are very proud of our PISA results, where we are among globally among top performance and also in mathematics. And PISA has shown that there is no socio-economic stratification in Estonian educational system. But what we discovered is that actually the same age group as children doing the PISA tests are doing also the basic school exams for mathematics. And 1/4 of the students are failing the exams every year. And in some schools, even a half of the students are failing the mathematics exams. And we also discovered that there is quite a huge socio-economic stratification in the educational system. So the results of your mathematics exams is connected to the income of your mother. There's a clear relationship between the data. So it wasn't an open data, but it was a data available to the researchers.
So new insights emerging from existing data. Yeah.
Basically, so far we have lived in blindness, and the policy advice has been wrong, has been inadequate, actually.
Oh, okay, new evidence, possibly supporting new policies or policy change. Okay, slightly more optimistic, perhaps. Urma, what are your experiences and practices that you?
I guess I go even more optimistic. Okay. So actually, I guess my field, so geoinformatics deals with location data, spatial data. This field has gone from complete closure to extreme openness, because just 50 years ago, maps were forbidden. You couldn't get them anywhere because it's military purposes. And in many countries, they still are actually forbidden. You can't enter India with a paper map. You will be arrested. But let's say 15 years ago, somewhat in that area, the shift started to happen, mostly probably pushed by the realization that spatial data is very powerful to analyze all sorts of things and improve, let's say, help society in many levels, from environment to society, all sorts of fields. But another push was, of course, satellites, because you can't sort of hide anymore, not so much. As NASA opened up, then ESA, European Space Agency, and then it sort of pushed that, what are we hiding here exactly? Because from satellites you can still see a lot. And that pushed, of course, European Union, Estonia legislation. According to legislation, is that all the data produced by Estonia Land Board is open. And that made, this kind of like a snowball effect. Yeah. So technically, I can say that 100% data that I use is open data. And I wouldn't have any of my grants that I right now have. They are all relying heavily on only open data. Because in my field, exactly, the data that is not open is almost impossible to get, or very, very complicated, because then there is a really good reason why it's not open. If I start listing that, what is the benefit or how much we can retrieve or has been already retrieved from spatial data is probably, I can start listing and then we list here until the evening, starting from mitigation of disasters. But in Estonia, a lot of spatial planning is relying on this, everything, like a lot of decisions are actually relying. But for example, in terms of data quality, there are issues, mainly in those places where what are not actually the agencies, many agencies produce spatial data, but that are not maybe originating from geoinformatics field, so strongly for land board, data quality is very good, metadata is very good. Of course, I can pick some things, but it's nothing actually. But then, of course, if it doesn't come from there, then it's a lot of different issue, and then it really depends if there has been a person who actually knows how to deal with spatial data or not. But there are good examples. For example, like Open Data Portal has, for example, we have from Rescue Board comes landscape fires. This data set really well. You can analyze and you can see that the main factor in why landscape fires happen are we, humans, because the spatial pattern shows they are close to the roads, close to the cities, hiking trails, for example. Then there's crime data, very good data set, open data set, like public offenses. They update, I think, weekly or something. So you can analyze you can see that actually what factors actually play where the crime or public offenses happen. So there are very good examples where, at least in spatial data, you can do a lot. And I can say also that in research, in my career, I saw how this boosted the field, totally boosted the field. The methods, the collaboration, it took it completely to another level the moment it opened up. Yeah. The closure was really hampering research and also the benefit, of course, to the society. So I think that's a very good example of how open data can help actually society. But of course there are buts with ethics and all those things that start to come play.
Yeah.
But
well, I think we will cover those questions later. And to what degree do you recognize Michael's observation that over time comparability may be an issue with respect to at least some variables or some data sets?
Yeah, so if the government is even our land board, they don't produce data for research. Yeah. So for them, the main purpose is that right now, up to date, the best data we have. They don't now they do version, but they don't think of versioning. Also, that exactly keeping the consistency of how it has been created. Landboard in general has a very good, they document at least. I can sort of go back, but all the others don't, and I have no idea even what's behind the data, what was like 5 years ago, and it's not comparable. So in time, it becomes tricky, but actually in research, at least in my field also, time is the most valuable aspect. Yeah. Because from history, we can predict the future, sort of. So, and if this link is not there, then it's very hard for the research to do, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Ott, what are your experiences with data? And you can choose whatever role you want to elaborate your experiences.
Yeah, so I completely agree that the situation when we look at the open data field as a whole differs really much. So when we take meteorology or geospatial environmental data and so on, or even police who early on took the role that they are going to publish everything in order just to reduce the number of data requests coming from students. So there are oftentimes just really practical instances, but at the same time, land board, environmental board, they have taken the kind of approach that everything they have should be reused, should be public. So that's kind of the positive side. What we have seen ourselves is that when data is made available as open data, I'm just going to bring you one example, business registry. The number of research that came after that increased. Mm. Everyone can just easily check this up, even through Google Scholar. Just look at the citations for business registry. So opening up has a significant impact, both on the bachelor master's degree level, but also wider research. So that's the positive side. We are utilizing data ourselves as well, and many of the things that has been brought out, data quality issues or data not even actually kept. So just to give you one example, we were looking into Tarkte smart roads. So apparently for whatever reason, back then the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, their transportation unit, didn't deem it worthy to save the information. So as a result, it is operational, but we cannot go back and see if different road closures, the situation at road has any impact on traffic accidents actually happening. Some of you might have seen some of the examples I have brought out when it comes to registry quality as well, sometimes horrible. Just simple visualizations. When I started to talk about the transportation accidents, then I just visualized the kind of where are the different traffic accidents happening. It was in the middle of Africa. So these are just some of the examples. Or at the same time, we are utilizing also in order to actually validate some of the decisions that are made in the government. Last year, there was the hunting licenses. It just validated that the argumentation was that we are increasing in those counties hunting licenses because bear attacks have destroyed the honeybee and so on. When comparing the hunting licenses to where the attacks actually happen, there was no correlation. It was literally someone decided to give the more hunting licenses in random areas, and there was no correlation. The argumentation was, of course, that there are too many bears, they are attacking the honeybees, and so on. We need to, in order to reduce that, we are going to increase the number of hunting licenses. But there is actually no correlation at all. Someone just made up. And this kind of, again, comparison on our end was made based on open data. But truth be told, there are issues. Similarly, when we talk about government open data, we are finding it extremely difficult to get access to kind of research itself as well, which is a whole another story. But I think we need to kind of implement the FAIR principle both in the government and in the educational system. Our biggest concern right now is that we are unable to get access to research that universities carry out due to copyright and other issues. But this is, in my opinion, insane as well.
Yeah, I would like to explore this further because there was this element of there was an element in the conversation that with open data or government-owned data, the research perspective is not taken into account, and there is also from the other side another signal that it's worth exploring. But I would first like to give the floor to Mikael to add to this.
Because I was the most critical and the least specific in examples. I was because I really liked how this. Attitude sort of progressed towards really more positive when you look at it from my side. But I think all the examples you brought actually demonstrate where the actual value comes from. Because I mean, when we talk about open data, the general story is, at least back in the day, was that okay, we have this data, we necessarily not need to use it in our operational, let's say, activities. Let's give it out. Someone might have a use for it, and that's how essentially sort of innovation happens. I mean. People take a look at the data and they see, wait a minute, I can do something with it. But all the examples here demonstrate that actually the value of the data comes from linking it with some other data sets. Yeah? So if there are only those individual data sets, then the value is to a degree limited. You can do nice graphs on it, but that's pretty much where you will sort of stop. But when you start to link it with actually, essentially your example is with not open data, then you start to see real strong sort of benefits. Okay, Evelyn's example is probably out of that group because yes, geospatial data, by definition, most of it now, I presume, is open and necessarily, okay, I can see some privacy concerns coming there as well, but at least adding layers to those geographical units should be relatively straightforward. But the biggest benefit, for example, I also like a lot this police and border guards open data set. I use it in my courses to demonstrate to students all kinds of fancy graphs you can do with that data. Complete population based, like everyone who has gotten some sort of fee, essentially there's a line in a table on that particular case. And then we start to think at, okay, how can we actually use it beyond simply visualizing certain patterns, because very specific patterns emerge there, especially traffic violations, like young guys late at night, older cars, etc., things like that. But how can we then actually do, for example, especially something which sort of the police and border guard is partially tasked with, as prevention, for example. And for prevention, when you think about it, this is basically blind from one eye in that sense, because this is data on events that have already occurred, but they emerge out of the whole population, and we only see those ones, those actual events that have occurred, not the zeros that haven't occurred. So a comparison would actually shows us, do those patterns that we see there are, let's say, atypical, as you were saying, with good PISA tests. If you cut it down according to socio-demographic background of the parents, then you actually see completely different distributions there. There where the actual value starts to come from for a certain task, and that is not open data anymore. I mean, the value comes from merging it with with not open data. So I don't know how to make those open data sets more linkable, probably is the question, but that obviously is the million euro question, because that all those privacy questions come in. How can you link, especially data on behavior, across those different data sets? That's the big one.
I see a theme popping up, which I would like to explore. But first, I would like to ask Ott a bit to expand a bit, elaborate a bit on what your experiences are. You talked a bit about it, on reaching out to the research community and having the conversation. What do you actually do, and what is it that makes it so difficult?
So from a research perspective, what we have done so far is proposing each year different topics that the government is trying to solve. So we are really selfish on that way. But also at the same time, we try to disseminate the information, because if the different data holders actually have gone into a lot of trouble, they have done a lot of investments, the worst that can happen is no one uses. Yeah. The second part is, when we did the kind of quick analysis ourselves, for many organizations, the news that researchers had used their data for research purposes came as a surprise. No one even knew about it. And they were like, whoa, really? We didn't know about it. We thought no one uses it. We knew a couple of organizations. So I think as a research community, we should share the results with the data holders themselves as well more. It might be actually relevant for them as well on a policy or in any other way as well. So that is one end. When I joined the government, early on we had this kind of a demand-based approach. So if you see a problem, if there is anything that needs to be opened up, please notify us. Because in the end, we need to make investments in places that there is actually demand as well. I don't believe that we should just invest everywhere. We are not rich in that term, but rather where is demand. What we started to ask at one point as well was, why do you want to use it? This is important and links with what Mikael brought out as well. Knowing why different stakeholders want to use the data helps us to design a process that is more relevant as well. When it comes to kind of linking, I don't believe that only linking different data sets works. So we decided a couple of years ago that we are going to publish even our survey kind of data itself as well. So for instance, we do different nationwide surveys on people's opinion on AI and so on. They are heavily used. I have seen that those same surveys are used in research and so on, both local, international as well, showing what the Estonian people think among different groups and so on. And they are standalone use cases. So it's a mix. I do believe that we need to kind of broaden our horizon in terms of how we approach open data. What we are right now working with Statistics Estonia is hopefully soon we can make our, for instance, salary information on all public sector officials available as synthetic data as a kind of a piloting project itself. Next step, can we make salary information in a privacy preserving way available for the whole nation? So I think this is one area. Or let's take population registry. Is there a possibility to make it available, accessible, usable for everyone? I think these are kind of the challenges, because we see open data is not kind of is not the right solution for every use case. Sometimes, unfortunately, you need to kind of get access through research purposes and so on. So there are different use cases. For some it works, for some it doesn't.
Yeah, thank you. Kuli, we talked about the conversation between data suppliers perhaps and also researchers. Do you recognize that there's a need for such a collaboration conversation? Is this taking place? Or is this something that you do not recognize, perhaps?
Of course it takes place, and actually I don't agree that it's too difficult to get the data for research, and still I think that connecting different databases is really valuable for research. For this mathematics example I gave, it took 1 month to negotiate the terms of how to use and how we can get the data. Is it too much, really? I don't think it's too much. We need to consider also the privacy and security concerns. And it's not only just the rules and regulations, it's that the people are much more aware and much more sensitive about the data. And if there are some questionable cases, it means that people are even less ready to share their data. But still, there is a lot of open data available there. But you really need to go deep into the metadata and how the data is collected. I've so many examples of how the methodology changed of the government has actually made the data not usable.
I'm just gonna maybe add on the trust side. It just kind of popped up on my mind that we forgot to ask what Estonians feel in terms of, like, do they trust research or not? But it was a latest research survey that we did in January, and what it showed was that 1/3 of Estonians don't trust the private sector when it comes to data processing. And it was like 1/5 brought out that they have decided to not use a private sector provided services due to concerns over trust, over data processing. That's huge numbers when we put into an economic perspective. At the same time, the government trust was roughly around 95%. So when you go to everyone else who don't consider themselves to be Estonians, the mistrust towards private sector was 50%. Half don't trust the private sector in Estonia. I'm just wondering, with all of that which has happened when it comes to research use of government health data and so on, what is the trust level today towards universities and so on? I'm just really curious, where does the research community land? We know that the private sector right now is in a really horrible place. The government is, I would say 95% is a good level, because there are always those who are skeptical. But where do the research community land? And I think kind of trust is a key, because if we lose trust, we end up not getting any access at all.
Evelyn, is this also relevant for your study, the trust question?
I mean, location data actually in general is still has a trust issue, and especially now. I mean, actually, I know that Estonia and Finland, especially both countries, have now started to reconsider if all the spatial data should be open because of Russia. Still are there considerations. I don't know that if now there has been some changes of thinking, but I know that there is increasing discussion in that area. So it is, of course, and for example, mobility data. This is one data that you can't just get, and this is very highly protected, sort of privacy issue. But most of the spatial data, like I said, from the satellites, you can technically see a lot, although you wouldn't say don't trust it. If you think that Google Maps is the ground truth, then it's not. I guess right now everybody can check what is the Gulf of Mexico. It can be overwritten. Google Maps shows, for example, if depending on which country you are, either you are Pakistan, India, it shows the border of Kashmir because it's under disputed. So it changes, depending on who to show it. So what is the truth? And autophotos and satellite images are also tweaked. Also in Estonia, if you look at our Tapa and Võru military areas, they are like smeared.
Blurred. Yeah.
So of course it is actually still a consideration you always have to. And regarding linking, what I wanted to say, the danger point in spatial data, it's a huge advantage, but it's also a danger that spatial data can be super easily linked, because the moment you have anything location, any locational data, you can immediately link. The limit is your imagination. Yeah. And there have been a lot of cases where actually exactly like people come up with very clever ideas how to actually pull out something else. It's not immediately there in the data, but the moment you link those data sets spatially, you can link them easily, then it reveals some new pattern. Now, for example, just one idea example that popped into my mind when was COVID hit. Then most of you know probably Strava, that is this tracking, sports tracking. The Strava data you could see it. And then all of a sudden people started seeing that in certain areas, like for example Australia, people are walking in some circles. And then it came out as a military base because they just walked around it and they didn't like one exercise. And it revealed some locations that were not supposed to be revealed. So who knows how to look and link something can actually find new patterns. Yeah. But that's also the advantage of spatial data. That is meant for finding patterns, but there is also a danger.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of open data, partly. Yeah. It can reveal patterns that you can't identify using other methods.
And especially linking the data, of course.
Ott, you want to add something?
Yeah, just to add, kind of from a security concern, actually the first instance where data that was open data no longer is open data is water and sewage line maps. So this was the first case. Similarly, so I used to live for a really long time in Sweden. The level of kind of information availability on individuals in Sweden is uncomparable to that in Estonia. But still in Estonia, you can see where people live, what type of vehicles they have, and a lot of other information. So unfortunately, this information as well has been used in, unfortunately, unlawful ways. So I think in some areas, considering all the experience that our dear friends from Ukraine has faced, we need to reevaluate in some cases. But at the same time, it needs to be done in a balanced way. So for instance, when we take the water and sewage line, this information is not only critical for research purposes, but who are working in road construction and so on. Even if we know where the sewage lines, water lines are, still the damage in Tallinn, millions of euros a year. So we need to take a more kind of a balanced approach. I remember in 2018, there were discussions about should we eliminate the water hydrants information. So the argumentation was that hydrants are basically the one vector to poison the whole of Estonia. But at the same time, if you're in a vehicle driving around, then everyone sees where those hydrants are. And actually, one of the organizations that were really concerned were the fire departments that we are actually utilizing this information all the time. Please don't close this information. This is vital. So I think we need to have like a social discussion on what is public, what is not.
Yeah. Okay. I think the picture is becoming clearer. So we have promises for open data, we have realities, we have some practical concerns, we have measurement issues, we have security concerns, and also some ethics concerns, which I will touch upon later. I announced in the beginning that I would like this conversation to be as open as possible. So I would explicitly like to ask members of the audience to report what whether they use open data and what their experiences are. Is there anybody in the audience who can say something about that? If not, we will simply have the conversation here. That's also quite all right, but this is your chance. Or do you have any questions you would like to raise at this moment? Yeah, Stefan.
Thank you. I'm Stefan Dedovic from the University of Tartu. So just wondering about open data issues and data quality that you mentioned. And primarily, I'm interested in your opinion how to ensure that organizations accept that they open it, but with good quality data, in a sense. So it's rather a question of the governance mechanisms. Do you order someone to open it, or do you allow the organizations to open it themselves willingly? And then how to ensure the data quality to be followed in this case? Because the experience that we had in the research, certain countries, not Estonia, although claiming that they have the most open data in Europe, or the most, that data at the end is really hard to be analyzed in this sense. So that is the question.
Okay. I think the first question could be, if you allow me to translate it just a bit, do you recognize this phenomenon that Stefan reports, or is this something that you do not necessarily? I see some nodding, yeah?
I mean, to some extent, at least in spatial data, I can also see that in Estonia, not so much, but other countries that technically, even like under Inspire, the European regulation, countries are supposed to report and make it open. And even Estonia, I've seen that the data certain areas has to be open, but it's actually not, or it's a fake open in terms of spatial data that they put some PDF, and I was like, in spatial data that is like useless, like you can put like a PNG also. And then it's like, okay, we have open link and something. Luckily, it's not so much in Estonia, but it is. And that regarding data quality, that is like super hard. I think that's maybe the main point where to put the effort right now, because we don't have like lack of data. It's rather the quality has to be improved, the metadata has to be improved, and this linking the data. And on the research side, we sort of have even like implemented in our team that when we get the data, we have a data quality checklist that what we have to always check first, that okay, if like, and the same is if we give out the data, we have to check that those at least, check out. So there are some ways how you can, of course, improve that, but it's a lot of effort and has to be worked quite consistently on it.
Yeah. Stefan, I think you triggered a lot of questions. I saw raising hands. So Mikael, Kuli, and then Ots.
Yeah, partially actually, the question triggered me to ask a question from Ott regarding this, because you said that very frequently government agencies are surprised at how much the data has been used when they have made it available in the open data portal. I don't necessarily know the mechanism, but I mean, it's there's still a license there. You cite the data, but the data owner or the one who has put it out into the portal isn't actually made aware of the fact that their data has been used for research purposes, let alone they have been sent the results of this research, which they might find not only interesting, but maybe very useful as well. And for me because if you think about open data, this same sort of criticism sometimes pops up that the data dump cannot really use it, a bunch of PDFs being thrown out there, compared to a situation where an institution actually makes the API available, live data, you can use it, you can even build a product maybe based on that. But what is how to make those data owners actually really invest their time? Because let's be honest, adding metadata it's a huge effort, and if it's not something which they have to do as a core business, they won't do it, because why bear all the cost to make it available to a bunch of researchers? I mean, they necessarily don't see a benefit. But if there would be a feedback loop where people who are using it actually, first of all, properly citing it and showing the results, and then the data owner actually is made aware of it, might even actually put in a couple of research questions that these other people might be able to answer them based on their data. They would start to sense that actually, wait a minute, giving more quality or adding more quality to the data actually brings something back to us as well, not simply that we're doing something because we have to do by law, so let's push it out, but actually let's do it high quality because we're going to benefit. Yeah. It's not going to be only a cost, we're going to benefit as well. Yeah. Is that possible, or is it actually it's already working somehow, or could that work?
Yeah, so I was actually going to say from that same perspective that I think there needs to be a feedback loop, because when we talk about data quality, it really depends on the use case and the user itself. So an organization itself might be more than satisfied with the data quality that they have, because they are collecting the information for their operational purposes. If they don't feel anything is wrong, they don't care, to be honest. So if no one is notifying that there are issues, then in the end, why should they care? Why should they invest more of their time? So that is one end. Of course, on the government level, together with actually Veiko, we kind of propose, there is a requirement on a data quality process that every organization needs to have in place. Statistics Estonia has supported organizations when it comes to metadata, glossary, and so on. The situation has gotten a lot better, but again, we need to have more of a community around open data. It's not everyone does their own thing in the silo. There is no feedback, criticism, giving kind of what are the challenges. I think this is a kind of a key aspect that can actually push us further. There are contacts for every data holder. Just contact, let them know. And the second thing that you asked, like, I don't think we should wait until the data is of a kind of satisfactory quality, publish, get feedback, and improve. That's a more viable approach than waiting for that special moment. I'm not sure what that special moment is when you're finally going to take that step.
Yeah. First, I would like to give the floor to Kuli and Evelyn, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I think that it's all about motivation of the data owner to open up the data, and also to make transparent the methodology of collecting the data. I just remembered an example. We were talking that the government is changing the methodology of collecting data, and why it does. Of course, it wants to improve the methodology. It's the reason number one. Sometimes it wants to reduce the administrative burden of collecting the data, but there's another reason. And I just remember that many years ago, when I was working for the National Audit Office of Estonia, we did a performance audit about lifelong learning. And Estonian indicators of how many people are doing trainings or participating in lifelong learning, the numbers were really low. We were lagging behind from from other European countries. And what the government did, first of all, of course, we spent a lot of EU money to do more trainings. But secondly, the government changed the methodology of collecting the data. So starting from, I don't remember from what year, government decided that any seminar, any basically meeting or gathering is considered as training. And we ended up with the data that starting from whatever, it's just spiked. It increased, and we are very fine. So the indicators are better, and we are using the EU money better. So government has different motivation to change the methodology, and sometimes it doesn't want to be transparent about the methodology.
Yeah, but isn't it the same in every single country? Let's take Lithuania with their salary increase. It's a great example. So that is like one end. There is like no lineage at all. Everyone does their own thing for whatever reasons. But I think, again, if no one knows that we care about how they go about it, then no one changes.
I wanted to actually advocate
please.
for I think your point that you mentioned, that in terms of data quality, first, get the data out there and get feedback. I think that is very good. In my field, I see it works in a way that there is also versioning. And you put your data out, you get feedback, or you discover in research, often happens also that, you rerun something and you discover actually something there is error. And instead of hiding it and putting it under the hood, you actually fix it and you put out new version, you keep the old version also public, and you say that those are the fixes, and here's the new version. And you can keep going like endlessly, and people can just choose that whatever version they want then, but they know also the document that, those were the fixes were done. Of course, you might think that, that reduces the trust in research. Like you said, oh, you guys, you don't know, you're constantly fixing something, right? Yeah. But I believe, at least what I've seen in my field, that actually, logically taken, it's actually, if you understand how the system, you see that it's very open, transparent, then yeah, okay, the errors happen instead of believing honestly that all the data sets are 100% truth. Yeah. There's always some errors. Yeah. That's inevitable, but at least I'm open. I fix those, and then there's a new version. So versioning is a very good way how to overcome all those issues and exactly improve the data quality, and then.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's a question also how the data has been collected. So, for instance, let's take kind of the elementary skills among the Estonians. Mm. So, if the surveys are sent out, if you can answer. Like, have you used the computer? You answer no. You don't need to do anything else. You can just close the survey. You put yes. You have 1, 2. You have tons of things. Every time you say yes, you have more explanations that you need to give. So for many, my assumption is many just decide to answer no because it saves time. So it's again a question about how do we approach even collection itself. I assume like even we need to fill in those surveys as well. Like, please bring out all the trainings you have carried out in the last 10 years. OSCD asks 10 years all trainings. How the hell should we have this information? There are. Literally 2 years ago, we had 2,000 lines of questions that they wanted the input. 2,000 lines. It took a person in my team 2 months to get all that information. And we are just bombarded with such requests. It's insane. For who? This is actually kind of viable. Why should we do that? Because we're just wasting, in my opinion, in some cases, time for everyone.
I think there was a question.
You have a question? Yes.
Talking about collection of data, I think that case of Strava actually is a really interesting one where you have the individuals who are consenting to have their data be shown, not actually being the ones that have the results or having the implications of that data being felt. So for example, whether it be the government now, their special cases or their special locations being disclosed, or I know even in the US context, Secret Service members disclosing their movements around the president, then President Biden. Have there been other cases where maybe the results of the people consenting for data actually having negative implications for other actors, and has that led to actually less willingness to give up that or disclose data and whatnot? Have there been any other cases where that has lessened the availability of open data and whatnot?
So there's a trust issue, I think, also.
Yeah, how is that affecting trust?
Might be just an increasing trend that currently what at the global level is happening in terms of exactly like Trump overwriting Gulf of Mexico, and then we start thinking actually there's two big tech companies. Google is one big trustworthy company. Everything it does for free. You get Google Mail for free, Google Maps for free. Why do you think Google Maps is for free? It's not for free. It's Google's business. It collects constantly information about where you are, what you're doing, how you're using, and it uses it. It sells, for example, to medical businesses to predict when some flu is happening. Because you are Googling flu in Estonia all of a sudden more, then this information is being sold and used for other purposes, actually. So I think people are becoming more aware of this, and it might at some point think like, I think people are closing down on like how we use Facebook, and we switch off already many things that we don't want those tech companies to use. And among those, of course, location information is one of the maybe most sensitive ones, because it can be immediately linked with everything because of location. So that might be just a general trend that we become more suspicious on one level, maybe. But I don't know. I don't have like immediately like an example where something has been closed down because of that. At least not from the back of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know an example about mobility data. I can't be too specific, but in Estonia we have a lot of information about available where you live and what car you drive, but also the mobility data. And some years ago, one of the reasons why the access to the mobility data was restricted was because of the police officers and their movement. Because if you have enough mobility data, you actually can recognize the person. And there were really, really huge security concerns.
But mobility data has never been open at that level. It's not possible to. You mean that from research side then?
If you have enough data points for one anonymous person, then actually you can recognize.
This is very well-known pattern in mobility data, but I mean that mobility data itself has never been open.
Yes.
At this level that you can never identify like that I am exactly like right now.
For researchers.
Yeah.
For researchers.
But for researchers, but then it's abuse of data, I would say. Because you are not supposed to personal level. I mean, I know mobility lab is from my department. I gave consent that I've been this level data that I will be tracked immediately at this level accuracy. I have to personally give like consent that yes, I can be tracked like this. Otherwise, it's a bunch of points, and you should never like one point pinning down at what they're doing. I think they should never do it.
I don't know.
But I know, of course, it's possible. It is possible.
But it was one of the reasons why.
To my knowledge, it's actually a fight, kind of like a competition between mobile companies, and mobile companies themselves want to use the data and sell this data to the government. Yeah. To my knowledge, and there is a law issue also that in Estonia, you maybe know it better, but to my knowledge, at least that's the reason. But
so. Yeah, just a quick comment. My first instances started with the mobility data as well, but then it's not open data in a classical sense. There are other reasons. So telco is actually selling through Telia specifically the services, but it's more maybe not in that sense examples, but let's take land registry and relatives death. People call up, hey, I want to buy your land and so on. Those are kind of annoyances that take place. That's real examples. And there are more in other kind of registry-based. So people just utilizing the available information they have at hand for entrepreneur reasons.
Okay, we'll talk about that later on. We're coming to an end of this conversation, so I would like to suggest that each of you thinks of a shout out. So what are your dreams, and what are obstacles in your practice that you would like to have removed? And I would like to encourage you to be as creative and radical as you can. So this is an awkward silence to allow you to dream a bit. And I would like to start with Neil. What are your dreams? And how to deal with privacy?
We started the session with me. Let's start with someone else.
I can start.
Evelyn.
As I was the most optimistic, one of the most optimistic, then maybe my expectations are also the lower ones. So I would be very happy if we just have a little bit better metadata, and then versioning would become more of a habit in all levels. That would help in terms of research, also like historical versioning, but also if you fix some errors, versioning, and then I'm happy already.
Okay. Well, that should be doable, perhaps, but I'm not an expert.
Metadata is pain, really. Everybody hates it.
Yeah, but this is what I find fascinating. We talk about open data, and I used one of the old TEDx videos of Tim Berners-Lee, who then very enthusiastically supports the idea of open data. Let's make it open data. And then you think, well, what's the problem? And I think from now to this conversation, I think we are all enthusiastic about this principle, but there are all kinds of buts and ifs and things to take care of. Versioning is perhaps one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Sorry, Cully, what is your dream?
Well, actually, step two from the point that Devani was describing is that transparency about what data is used, how it is used, also from the researcher's side. It's not always actually quite transparent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a big appeal of, I think, also to the members in the audience to be thoughtful of this transparency. Yeah. Ott or Mikael?
I can take.
Ott.
Yeah.
Then you have another 1 minute to think of or shout out.
So I'm going to take a practical approach. I think kind of the dream is that at least for like 50% of open data sets, we have like 5 use cases that we are known of.
Okay.
So this is something that we can all learn from.
Okay. Again, appeal to the audience to do that. And Mikael, I would say final words for you.
No. I mean, I'm not so skeptical anymore, as I was saying at the beginning. Why? Because I mean, partially, what is actually open data? Is it a common good? Probably it's not. It's hard to think of a common good. It's definitely something where, let's say, everyone would potentially have an interest in using it, but very few are responsible for actually making it open. And that's always a situation where the costs are within one particular side, anyone else would see benefits. Then actually you need to make it work also for the data owner, that they would internally be motivated to put out a better quality type of data, so it would be more used basically. So how to ensure that this feedback sort of happens, that we as the research community who uses open data actually motivates data owners to improve quality, because in the end we depend on them and they do it essentially for us, they do it for free.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask. Actually.
Yeah. Okay, I'll allow it for now. Yeah,
just
please.
Example of the mindset saying that, like I said, my field can come from very close to very open. And I can say from myself that I was used to also 10 years ago very closed about my own data. Was very protective, and now complete open.
Yeah.
And why is exactly that I have seen just this positive effect, that how much I gain from it. And then I can also see that others gain from my own data, and there's nothing to lose really in spatial data. It's more beneficial. But there is this but that making it open is a lot of effort. I have to put our team makes a lot of effort to make exactly proper metadata quality check, that it's not, just like dump. But the mindset, I think this positive experience hopefully increases this positive feedback loop.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I think the time has already passed. We thought of this session, and we thought of the title, which was slightly pessimistic. Dialogue of the Digital Death. My understanding is that we were way too pessimistic. And I have learned from this conversation that there are many prospects, but there is no such thing as frictionless open data use or something like that. There are investments that have to be done. There are incentives to look out for. There are also transparency issues, both for, let's say, the supply as well as the demand for open data from both sides. I've learned a lot. I hope that members in the audience, researchers, whatever, that are using open data or will possibly in the future start using open data, have a better understanding of the potential of open data, but also are better able to deal with the pitfalls of using open data. And with that having said, I would like to thank you a lot for contributing to our understanding.